everyone, David here from Beyond EV, and today I'm at the Sydney ICC for the Sydney International EV Autoshow, Australia's premier electric vehicle expo. Over the next 3 days, they're going to be showcasing the future of transportation with the latest EVs, charging technology and sustainable transport options, all under one roof. From family SUVs to luxury performance vehicles, if it's electric and exciting, you'll find it here at the Sydney International EV Autoshow. So join me as I take you on a tour through the expo and show you everything the show has to offer on this episode of Beyond EV, your home for everything BYD. So I'm just going to take you through a bit of a walkthrough of the expo to start us off, and where I'm at right now is at the front entrance, and you turn right, walk over to the far wall and you'll be met with the BMW stand. First car on the block is the BMW iX1, and next to that the BMW iX2. And I must admit, I never used to be a big fan of BMW interiors, but I must say with their latest generations, they have definitely turned it up a notch. It's much more modern and contemporary, not so business-like like it used to be. And the last car on the stand was a very classy BMW i5 with the iconic BMW kidney-shaped grills that light up on the i5. Next to BMW was the desk where you could book in your test drives. And directly behind that, although you can't see it, was a stand for Cars Guide. And the next stand along the back wall was for Toyota. And of course, on the stand was the Toyota BZ4X full EV offering from Toyota. In fact, they had two of them on the stand, no RAV4 hybrids like they had at the Melbourne show. No frunk in the BZ4X, just electrical components for the drivetrain. And the big plastic wheel arches that you see on the side, which looks okay on the black BZ4X, but on the white it stands out quite a bit. And next on from them was Electrogusto, which appears to specialise in EV converting classic cars, and they had a couple of really good examples on display. The first one on the stand looks to be an old Mercedes G-Class from probably around the 1970s by the looks of it. The electric motor looked really cool in there, but electrification aside, this was a very clean example of an old school G-Class. Next up from that was an electrified Porsche 356. Now, these things are old school. This thing would be dating back to the 60s. Again, another really clean example of an old school car. Really, really nice. And next on their stand was an EV converted 1973 Volkswagen squareback wagon. Again, another clean example, and I must commend Electrogusto for the cars they had on display. They were very well presented.
That's probably control.
And walking around from them, we had not Tesla, but Tesla Owners Australia, with a number of Teslas on display. All the current and former models were on display, but there was one Tesla in particular that I had to take a look at in the back that had a bluey purpley wrap around it, and it definitely stood out. They had a number of Model 3s and Model Ys on display in varying colours and with varying levels of modifications to them. And directly across from them was the AGL Energy stand, and they had a few wall chargers on display and going through what they can offer to EV owners. Now, truth be told, I actually use AGL as my electricity vendor, and I'll actually be doing a video in the future about the cheapest way to charge your EV or plug-in hybrid at home, so keep an eye out for that. And next up from them was the Smart stand with the new #1. And the #3 on display. Sorry, apologies again, same as the last video. If you're not seeing much of the cars, I'm trying to keep the camera angle down just to try and keep people's faces out of the shots. And right next to the smart stand was a single MG Cyberstar. They didn't have a stand, just the car on display. And I must admit, in person, this is a sick looking car. From the scissor doors to the shape and just look of the exterior of the car, all the way into the interior of the car with the red upholstery and the dash and center console, it actually comes together really, really nice. And going on from the Cyberstar, we move on to Xpeng. They had a silver grey and bright orange G6 up the front. Frameless doors on the G6 as well. Decent amount of boot space in the back. And of course, center stage on the Xpeng stand was the Xpeng Aero HT, the flying car, which yes, does actually fly, but very unlikely you will ever be able to use this in Australia. And Xpeng were a little bit more open with it at the Sydney show compared to the Melbourne show. I remember back in Melbourne it was completely roped off and there was maybe a 2 metre gap between the rope and the flying car itself, so you couldn't actually touch it. But this one you can see there's no rope, you can go up, people were touching the blades, touching the doors, trying to get into it. Yeah, it was a bit more welcoming at the Sydney show compared to the Melbourne one. And here's the orange Xpeng G6, and you'll see these on the road not so far into the future, and they will definitely stand out amongst the absolute deluge of white, black and possibly grey cars we see on the road right now. And on the other side of the Xpeng stand was the Xpeng G9. Now I really rate this car. It is such luxurious looking car on the inside. It just has that classy SUV look on the outside. A little bit of BMW X5 when I look at it, but the inside, much better. It's got a triple screen set up across the front, digital instrument cluster, central infotainment system, and a third dedicated screen for the front passenger. And there is a view filter on it, so you can't actually see it from the driver's seat, it just looks black, but as you move over you can see it quite clearly from the passenger seat. And last on the Xpeng stand is the Xpeng X9 super luxury people mover. Now I actually love this car as well. The seats, the amenities in it, it is a phenomenal car. You would have seen it a bit in my last video about the Melbourne EV show. Seeing it again in person, love it. And next on from the Xpeng stand was the GWM stand. And they had a Jolion hybrid, an Ora, and a Tank 500 on their stand. And the fact that they got the Ora on the stand means they finally got a full EV on the stand for an EV expo. And that's just in reference to the fact that at the Melbourne show it was all hybrids. Now this is actually the new GWM Ora GT, the upspec version of the standard Ora, and I must admit it is actually a pretty cool looking car. And I'm aware that the Ora actually has a really interesting feature. So if you buy an Ora GT, you don't ever have to start the car. If you sit down in the seat, you can just take off in it. It automatically turns on itself when you sit down in the driver's seat. Now that's all well and good, but I also hear that this doesn't have Android Auto, and as a Google Pixel user, this would likely be a car I wouldn't shortlist for that omission alone. And then we have the GWM Tank 500, GWM's answer to the Toyota Land Cruiser. Very large car, barn door opening for the boot, with a full-size spare attached to that. Now moving on from GWM, we have Kia, pretty much front and center as you walk in the front entrance to the show, but turn left instead of turning right. And on the Kia stand they had the Kia EV5, EV6 and EV9. I love the interiors in the Kia EVs. They're very sharp, very modern, very, very nice in all of their EV offerings. Moving on to the EV9, their full-size EV. Again, another phenomenal car with a phenomenal interior. Has won many awards around the world for Car of the Year, and you would probably see a lot more of these on the road if it wasn't for the price. They are quite on the high side when it comes to price, but they do deliver. They are a very, very nice car. If it had a European badge on it, these things would sell like hotcakes, but it doesn't, and that's probably why you don't see as many of them on the road as what you probably should. So much room, even with the third row up, you can see how much space there is back there. And if that third row was down, that boot is massive. And last on their stand is the Kia EV5, their smaller SUV offering, and this actually utilises a BYD LFP blade battery. Yes, that's right, unlike the Kia EV6 and EV9, the Kia EV5 is actually manufactured in China by Kia, and it utilises BYD's LFP blade battery as its power source. And in the middle of the show we had the Chery stand, and they had the Omoda E5 on display. And at this point I've come to realise that the mid-size SUV segment is the one that every maker wants to hit, and hit big there. And most marques had not just one but two on their stand, and a lot of the time it was two of the same model. Chery had two Omoda E5s, Xpeng had two Xpeng G6s, Toyota had two BZ4Xs, although I don't know what else they'd put up there. It was quite clear that this was the segment that all the makers wanted to hit. And behind Chery was the Ford stand, and on their stand they had a blue Ford Mustang Mark E with the signature Coke cans in the front like they had in Melbourne, despite the fact that the front is not cooled.
Yeah, the petrol Mustangs
But I think the vehicle that people were more interested on their stand was the Ford Ranger Stormtrak, their plug-in hybrid that's due to come out very shortly and rival the BYD Shark 6. On display they had their V2L or truck bed discharge being demonstrated on their stand, with TV, a coffee machine and a few other things being powered by the plugs in the truck bed. Very Ranger looking on the outside. You wouldn't be able to tell this was a plug-in hybrid until you saw the badge on the side. Behind the Ford stand was the Audi stand, and they had a number of EVs on display, including an e-bike, the Audi electric mountain bike with a Bros 36 volt motor in it. Now, some of you might not know that I was at one point quite into mountain bike riding and know a fair bit about electric mountain bikes, and those Bros motors are some of the best that you can get. Now, I can tell you straight out, without even looking this up, this is just going to be an expensive bike. The Bros motor, Mavic wheels, Stellar Italia seat, Olin suspensions. This screams premium e-bike, and I would hazard a guess that it would actually cost more than a lot of used cars on the market right now. But as for the cars, I believe they had a couple of Q4 e-trons on display, as well as an RS e-tron GT. I'll be perfectly honest, I know a lot more about their bike than I do about their cars, but they are definitely nice to look at. And next to them was the Europcar stand, which was also the placeholder for the Cupra Tavascan that they had on display on their stand. A very bold interior in the Tavascan, not something you'd usually see from a VW brand. The dealer cars on display, so Volvo had the C40 and the XC30 on display. Didn't recall which dealer in particular was displaying these. And just above the Volvo vehicles, we had the MSI Gaming stand, and they had a number of gaming stations and had a number of their gaming PCs and peripherals that you could try out. And next to MSI was Roscoe and the guys at Amazing EV. They are Australia's first dedicated used EV marketplace. So if you own an EV and looking to sell it, Amazing EV would be a very good idea to consider putting an ad in on, as you know that the buyers that are viewing his site are looking for an EV. And next to them was Nish and the guys at EVTrove. And directly in front of all of those stands was the BYD vehicles, in particular the vehicles from BYD Haberfield, the dealership that had these cars on display. They had three in particular: the C-Line 6, a BYD Seal Premium, and an Atto 3. And I was a little bit surprised that BYD corporate didn't have a stand at the show, or perhaps even at least a Shark 6 on display, because I think that would have garnered a lot of attention. Had a bit of a walk by of these cars, didn't really go through them. We know them inside and out. And pretty much every other video on this channel will be about these cars. ANCAP had a stand at the show, and on display they had the crash test example of the GWM Canon Alpha Hybrid. And before the show, when media were walking around, they gave us a bit of a talk about how they test EVs and hybrids, and testing's quite similar because they want to see how safe the battery is when it is impacted in a crash. And this example in particular, the GWM Canon Alpha, actually achieved a 5-star rating recently. And on the other side of the wall was the Hankook stand, and on display they had their range of Hankook Ion Tyres. These are the first tyres that have been developed, engineered and manufactured specifically for electric vehicles.
Yeah, right.
And next to the Hankook stand was the Zeekr stand, and they had a number of cars on display. They had a lot more cars on display here in Sydney as opposed to what they had at the Melbourne show. They only had a couple of Zeekr X's at the Melbourne show, but here in Sydney they had their People Mover and a couple of Zeekr 001s as well. And moving on from Zeekr, we had a new brand on the scene, Deepal. Now, if you haven't heard of these guys, they are a sub-brand of Changan from China, and Changan are one of China's leading manufacturers of electric vehicles. They generally sit around second or third in total sales behind BYD in China. They are quite a big player over there. So it'll be interesting to see how they go in the Australian market, because let's face it, no one's really heard of Deepal, but their vehicles look to be quite good and innovative and different. First up is the Deepal G318, which is a RAV4 sized vehicle from Deepal. Quite a large boot space on it. But it was this car on the Deepal stand that caught my eye. This is the Deepal E07, and it's not going to be available just yet at launch, but it is completely different to anything I've seen in terms of a car of its size pretty much anywhere. Essentially what this thing is a shooting brake style car. It's almost like a wagon slash SUV, but the boot is completely novel and not anything I've ever seen before. When you look at it, it just looks like a normal shooting brake style SUV car, but it actually has a flip down tailgate like a ute, and the glass hatchback across the top is not a hatchback. It is a sliding piece of glass, and it will slide open to turn this car into a ute. None of us knew how to operate it. The button to open the tailgate was pretty straightforward, but the buttons to open the sliding glass are just on the inside, and it took us a while to figure it out. I did end up finding the button eventually, so this is how you open it up and turn it into a ute. So when you open up this glass opening, there is actually another glass window behind that second row of seats. So the interior cabin can be separated from this tray area completely. In addition to that car, they also had a couple of SO7s and an SO5, and that orange SO7 looks like it might give that Xpeng G6 a bit of a run for its money in the colour category. And moving on to the last stand of the show, the Segway Ninebot stand. And Segway were there. Now you probably know Segway from their boards that they used to sell, but they've since moved to scooters. And I used to own an electric scooter. I know Segway scooters quite well. So they had their range of scooters on display. A new and improved ZT model, off-road model, was on the stand, but the star of the stand for me was the Segway go-kart. Now this is a full-on go-kart. It is able to reach up to 45 kilometers an hour speed. It is full electric, and it actually has a number of pretty cool features. First of all, it operates as a go-kart. You can just drive it around like a go-kart. Secondly, you can use it as a game controller. So they had a demonstration set up where the steering wheel and pedal inputs can be connected to a gaming console. And in addition to that, the back wheels actually pop off and they form a dedicated hoverboard. And you can see over here next to the stand there is a racetrack set up. and we got to be the guinea pigs to try out the go-karts and crash them first if they were too fast before everyone else did. So I actually took a recording of that, and I'll play that for you right now. So I'm about to take part in the Segway media race, and this is my car here. Let's hope I don't bloody crush it.
Ready? 3, 2, 1, go!
Whoa!
Finish!
Second place. No good. So that was the Sydney International EV Autoshow. It certainly held up to its name of Australia's premier EV show. Plenty of cars on display, but which one did you like the most? Let me know down in the comments. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more BYD content headed your way. That's it for now, and I'll see you in the next one.